Do you ever wish that you were stupider, dumber, less informed, more ignorant about the threats that we face? I really do. I was thinking about this earlier, sort of as I was moping my kids to the school on a school run. I was thinking, God, it must be so nice to just be blissfully dumb and ignorant of like all the world's problems, like so many people are. There's a stupidity epidemic or an ignorance epidemic in Britain and the wider Western world, I swear. Like, with the climate crisis, right, I think about this a lot. I think about civilizational collapse about 3 or 4 times a day. Like, what are we going to do? What will I do with my family? It's definitely going to happen. And I just think, like, God, how freeing, how liberating would it be to just not have to worry about that stuff? Like, so many people don't worry about that stuff or don't believe that it's real. And even if you don't believe that the climate crisis is real, like maybe you're one of these people who thinks it's just going to be a little bit hotter in Britain, or, you know, the weather might be a little bit more extreme. But the reality of the climate crisis is it's intrinsically linked with like global financial collapse. Like, you can sort of war game it in your head. You can go like, okay, well, look, really the climate crisis is a sort of, could be described as a fossil fuels scarcity crisis. Like, we're hooked on fossil fuels, which is where all the carbon in the atmosphere comes from, right? We're hooked on fossil fuels, but as these fossil fuels become scarcer and more risky to pull out of the ground, which is why we see things like, you know, the deep water horizon mess up by BP. It's why we see erratic geopolitical activity like Trump going into Venezuela. It's why we saw him dangerously sail close towards the idea of invading Greenland, which would also be about fossil fuels. And it's why a lot of people think Netanyahu went into Gaza, because there were oil fields discovered off the coast of Gaza about 5 or 6 years ago. And it's why ultimately we will end up drilling for more oil in the North Sea. That probably will happen in some capacity. But as fossil fuels get more scarce, the price of them goes up. And it's not just the price of oil, like filling up your tank, that will go up, because every business in the world is basically somehow rooted in fossil fuel consumption and costing. The price of products and services and food will go up. And so how do we describe that in economic and political terms? That's inflation, isn't it? And how do we fight inflation? Well, central banks jack up interest rates, don't they? That's literally the only tool in their arsenal. They're like, well, we're seeing inflation, so we better increase interest rates, which would be fine if it was like a micro level inflation. Like if the economy's grown too fast and everybody's got too much money in their pockets and they're buying too many oranges, and so the prices of oranges go up. Then if you raise interest rates, then mortgages and rents get more expensive. So you've got fewer pounds to spend on oranges. Ergo, the cost of oranges goes down. If everyone's got too much money in their pocket, then maybe that works. When it's a macro fueled inflation, like oil and gas are really expensive, and so by extension, the cost of everything else is getting more expensive, it doesn't make any sense to then jack up interest rates, because it doesn't matter how high you make somebody's mortgage repayment thing like every month, or how high their landlord then makes their rent, the cost of oranges is not coming down. Like, it's that expensive because of the cost of natural gas and oil to ship it into the UK. So what then happens, sorry, this is really long and garbled, but what happens when you raise interest rates and you make everyone's mortgages and rents super expensive, and their energy bills are super expensive, and all their food has become super expensive, and everything else has become really expensive? So then they've got no money, but you have a national debt. So you like err on the side of caution of raising their taxes again, because you're really worried that if you go over this bell curve where people are just completely financially broken, they can no longer afford to pay their council tax or repay their credit cards or whatever, you might really fundamentally break your economy. So you borrow more to pick up the slack, and then the national debt goes up. The national debt goes up. Then observers of the British economy go, well, I wouldn't buy British bonds because their national debt is out of control, right? So basically the point I'm trying to get to is like fossil fuel scarcity slowly but surely results in global financial collapse. And you sort of see this happening at a glacial pace. And you go, why is nobody doing anything about this? Like, why aren't we radically moving ourselves off of oil and gas to control that inflation as things get more scarce? We should be powering our economy with renewables as much as we can. Even if you make the case that you can't totally leave fossil fuels behind, you should be making that transition as soon as possible, just to protect yourself economically. This isn't, like, forget all of the lefty liberal stuff. This is an economic discussion, financial and political. If you want to avoid far-right radical populism and fascism, if you want to avoid global financial collapse, you have to transition to renewables. But nobody's having that conversation. Instead, you know, what was the big story on Nick Ferrari this morning on LBC? And this is like, you know, I'm not suggesting that there's a conversation about environmentalism or this and he's chosen this. I'm just saying, as an example of what is the top story today, it's like a few local councils are taking down the Ukraine flag. That's what folks are talking about. That's what people need to hear about, is like, should we or shouldn't we take down the Ukraine flag? Which there is a whole sort of satirical bit or like segment you could go into there about like how it's the same people who wank themselves limp about putting up like raise the colours. We've got to have our flags on every other lamppost. It's important. That flags are important, Aid. And now in the blink of an eye, they're just like, yeah, but what even is a flag? We should just take down these flags. There's a whole thing that you could go into about that. But regardless of that, the top story this morning in late stage capitalism, as we stare down the barrel of climate apocalypse and a global financial crash, the symptoms of which we're already seeing now, with the IMF saying 50-50 chance of a UK sovereign debt crisis. The top story that we're talking about, instead of the actual real issues we're facing, is whether or not it's right to take down a flag from a few reform councils. Like, I wish I was dumber. I wish that was the sort of thing that inhabited my head. Like, oh, I'm really angry about those flags. I can't stop thinking about flags 3 or 4 times a day.